لا 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 خلاص.
مش معقول. اي شغل تصويب بنفسه باين. تصويب بنفسه. وحش انا بس اطمن عليك يعني. ثلاثة وأربعة عندي لكتشر. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for making it, despite the weather. I'd just like to introduce Omnia very quickly. Of course, we are very happy to host the first talk by Omnia Khalil, our research fellow, who has joined Pathways a couple of months ago. Let me just introduce Omnia quickly. Omnia is a doctoral lecturer at the Department of Anthropology and Interdisciplinary Studies at City College of New York, CUNY. She is an affiliated professor with the Geography PhD program at the Graduate Center. Her research and writings focus on urban geography, counterinsurgency, violence, political economy, cross-cutting with revolution. She's currently working on her book manuscript, Counterinsurgent Geographies, about policing Cairo's urban poor neighborhoods. Since 2008, she focuses as an urban researcher on community participatory action planning and has led many projects in Cairo, working with local communities towards urban upgrading and anti-gentrification. without further ado, please, Omnia, the floor is yours. And
thank you so much. First, it's a pleasure. It's a huge pleasure. It has been a while. I haven't been here. It's very hard to speak in English, but I will do my best. Thank you so much, Professor Adli, Inji Hgazi, Nadine, Nance, all the project who is doing amazing work with me to really try to frame what I'm trying to research here. And I'm now writing my book, which is about counter-insurgent geographies, but this is not exactly what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the cities that we are in now and with all the transformation that is massive that is happening in here. And I'm framing it between destruction and construction to try to understand together what's going on. I think I'm going to post the questions more than I'm going to say anything. And I have to say hi to Hanan because that's been my time. In the past few years, I think it was very challenging talking to my mother over the phone every time. And she keeps trying to describe to me how she's losing her way. She lived in Mu'attam, very close nearby, here in Tajammu, like in terms of new districts or new settlements, and how she keep describing to me, she tried to go to Al-Ataba, she tried to go to Al-Muhandisin, with massive anger that she's losing her way, whether around the house where we live, in the few blocks where we live, since I was a child, or to take the microbus or autobus to understand what's going on, and then suddenly she can't find her way. And for me, this was, as an anthropologist, it's an anecdote, but in the same time, I need to absorb her anger and try. And she's like, okay, tell me what is your last article that you have written, because I don't understand what's going on. So we keep discussing it, but it became something that was massive in our understanding together of to what's going on. And in the same time, the years of my fieldwork, 2019 and 2020, this was a constant conversation between me and many of my friends. 2020, in the time of the pandemic, friends who are living in Heliopolis and Medinat Nasr would be like, we were in the lockdown for 1 week. We opened the door. We didn't find the street. We found the bridge and we don't know what's going on. So this is back then I started to frame it in a way that Cairo is in its way to disappearance. And I wrote an article. It's now going to be a book manuscript, inshallah, about the disappearance of Cairo and what does it mean to lose our everyday landmarks, because it's a lot to lose the ground, even with all of the virtual realities that we are living in. The city itself, physical, it has its own historical materialism in its existence. And when we lose our ways, we don't know what to do. And this was not only about this, but also it was about understanding all of these photos. This was actually sent to me by someone who lives in Old Cairo. All of this awnash that is there, the bulldozers that are all around, wiping down and demolishing massive places and places that I know by heart. And then in 2019 and 2020, with even discussions with some people here in the room, we were like, okay, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what is happening. Because when I was doing my MA in 2014, if someone would have told me that this would be the end result, I would have, gone crazy. But now we are living it, and this is what's going on. And including that the GPS system in itself starts to lose its way, right? You use the GPS if you are lucky. If we are lucky and we know how to use a smartphone and we can use it from a smartphone and try to be guided by the GPS, it's not even working and it's not really guiding us to do what we want to do. So this is what I'm showing you today between the destruction and construction that is happening in the city, and try to understand it together. I took this photos actually 2 days ago. This is in front of Sur Magra Al Ayun. So this is part of Old Cairo and Al Basatin. And literally the neighborhoods are not there. There is nothing, right? Just justification, the legal justification or the policy justification of each of these destruction is very different in each neighborhood. And I'm more than happy to offer you what is the logic that the state is giving us or the different governmental institutions are giving us in terms of this destruction. So this is what's going on. In terms of What does it mean to hear this phrase? It's very repeated. I get depressed every time I go out because I lose my way and I cannot recognize where I am. And this phrase is repeated from various classes of people who I'm talking over the phone with. Whether they are my mother, who I started with as a middle-class person, or I'm talking about people who are collaborators in my research, or I'm talking people who are actually roaming around Egypt, not Masr. So they are also losing their ways, and they don't know what to do. And I mean, 2017 and 18, we saw the destruction that is going into a very high level of contestation between the government and the residents. This is mainly from Gezirة al-Barra. And what does it mean that we started even to see it on the ground, that the images of عربيات الأمن المركزي or the Center of Security Forces or even the military tanks were included, which was a lot to start to understand. And some people from the field, and this is before Gaza, started to say ليه بيعملونا إن هم يهود. People actually started to use this analogy that as if they are Palestinians before الإبادة حتى, يعني I'm sorry, like before the genocide, to try to understand why the government is doing this to us, right? And back then I was like, okay, neo-colonial theory, and I was like, Omnia, no, I mean, wait, you know, I mean, until الإبادة, and then خلاص, it's done. And so this is what was going on. This is all the Cairo, actually, like يعني مجرى العيون, the whole area of مجرى العيون. And this photo is 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. And now I'm going to show you some of the destruction that is there. What does it mean to see the destruction? Because I was like, when I was back then in a past life, I was an architect, and back then we used to understand that the ISDF, which was called Informal Settlement Development Fund, were marking some places to be so-called unsafe areas, right? These unsafe areas, and this is Maspero Triangle or Musalas Maspero, as everyone know it, and the areas that were marked by red, that is in a threat of maybe to get forced evicted, was that small in terms of the areas and how big it is. But in terms of seeing how much it's literally wiped out of the neighborhood, it's literally all the neighborhoods. And this became very misleading to many of us as urban researchers to understand what's going on. What is the difference? When we ask anyone in the governmental institutions, they're like, oh, okay, we are only removing the so-called العشوائيات, right? Everyone who's in Buna Ahali or in self-built housing, they are getting removed because they need so-called more dignity and more better life, right? But then when it started really to happen, this is really what's going on, is the other side. And this is Musalas Maspero. This is Masr al-Adima, which there is a huge thing that is happening there, I mean, over the years. So this is all is getting already removed. All of this beside the red borders, it's already not there. But actually this one that you see in purple is also not there, and it's not counted, right? It's not counted. It's a justification. And this is where was exactly this area is where ضرب 17-18 was. If anyone is wondering where we are, it's called Qom Gharab, and this area it's called Batn al-Baqara, and officially as a district, it's called Cairo as a district. It's a huge district. So I mean, all of this wiping out of these areas is actually massive, with no justification that they are so-called informal or unsafe areas as the justification was for these areas. And this is something that like started to be like very hard to deal with. This is Gezirة al-Barra. It doesn't have any kind of so-called unsafe areas. And justification actually of removing people from there is actually has to do with لجنة استرداد الأراضي, which is the land reclamation, state land reclamation, where the government is only reclaiming their own land as an ownership. So this is a justification of this project in terms of it's a future project that is owned by Emirati, whatever, but this is a future work. It's not something that I should speak about now, but this is what does it mean to see how, and there was a very good article by Dr. Nabil Al-Hadi about what does it mean that we are losing Gezirة al-Barra even as an environmental spot in the middle of Cairo, right? With all of this massive green lands, and this is, you can see, I mean, it's 2018, here we are 2022, right? I mean, we are talking about 4 years, and this is the massive transformation I'm looking at. This is in Maghreb al-Ayun, or the other is the northern part of all the Cairo, and here you see that all of these red areas was mainly actually an area of the tanniers and madabigh. And it was really, I mean, the buildings were deteriorated. We can buy all of what the government want to say about what's going on in there. And then when you see there is a dissolve that is going to happen slowly on purpose, because I wanted you to see what does it mean that all of this is wiped out. There is nothing here now, nothing, literally nothing, and this is all now is becoming a touristic project because it's going to be connected to Jama Amr ibn al-As and to Matḥaf al-Hadara al-Jadid, where they put the new mummies, and I'm sure you have witnessed in April 2021 the mummy parade, the international mummy parade. So this is what's going on in the neighborhoods that I care to talk about, or I care to analyze, which was part of my PhD and now part of an ongoing research. I don't know how to stop it actually. So this is what's going on, right? And this is my assumption. I mean, I was so scared for so long to count because I hate counting as an anthropologist. I didn't care about it at all. But I decided to start with all of the red lines that the government was giving as part of ISDF and making number of calculations to understand how many people got evicted from all of these neighborhoods. And I was literally scared for a year and a half only to count. And we had debates among many of us as urban researchers how we should count. But then the most accurate number that I am 90% sure of, that we have 2.8 million who are evicted and relocated from their own neighborhoods. And this number is only, just to tell you how it's very inaccurate, it's only based inside the red lines. Because we only know the number of units and the number of people that the government is giving to us inside the red lines, right? So like now in the 2.8 million people, actually, Jazeera al-Warraq is not included, right? The people in all of this area behind the aqueduct of Majra al-Ayun is not counted. The people all around Qom Ghurab and Darb 17, 18 and all the houses around are not counted, right? So this is how I am claiming that this number is actually a fraction based on the numbers that the government actually released in terms of how many units are located in ISDF. And the way I calculated this has to go with back and forth because I did work on the ground with number of neighborhoods and I knew how many people live there, and that's why I was able to make my assumption in terms of counting the units and how many people were evicted. And in terms of the constant argument I'm hearing everywhere, even over Facebook fights, which is becoming very interesting. This is how many apartments the government has built in terms of relocating the residents. This is a number that is all about 31,000 apartments, right? Which maximum can take 159 only with the completion as if every 5 are gonna live there in each apartment. Maximum I'm giving them 200,000. 200,000, right? So this is really what's going on. That we don't know, and actually no, sorry, we know that all of these people have no place to go. Why we don't see them in the streets? I think we all see them in the streets if we want to really be class sensitive and see how many people are becoming homeless. But also definitely there are new neighborhoods are in the making. Which is, I mean, I already published an article about this. I mean, La'ba, in terms of La'ba, which is in Giza, all across the ring road, there are new neighborhoods that are in the making. And we are talking about, I mean, we are talking about Sao Paulo 20 years ago. We are talking about what does it mean that people are being pushed out to the periphery with no solutions, right? And these people are not, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm using the word these people because this is the discourse that is othering them all the time, stigmatizing the people, Islamifying the people. If I'm gonna build on Mike Davis, what does it mean to Islamify the people? And then it's easy to put them out, right? And no one cares. And everyone is like, I mean, yeah, a few weeks ago, last January, someone looked at me and they're like, no, there is no that much homeless in the streets. As if I have to prove the phenomena myself. I mean, I don't know what to do as a researcher. I mean, I felt like, okay, I mean, just please open your eyes and stop roaming around Egypt and try to join us in Masr. This is the only thing I need to say, right? But I mean, what does it mean with the levels of poverty that we are all living in now, though we are in a privileged spot, that we are witnessing all of this destruction and all of these people are literally in the streets. So this is my part about destruction, where people have went, actually they go to the nearest place or the nearest neighborhood where they can literally take a microbus to the new place. which is becoming very interesting ethnographically to see how many microbuses in the old neighborhood, while the evictions are happening, are only calling for one neighborhood. لعبة 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 وراء الحضر وراء الحضر, like إنه خلاص كل الميكروباصات are oriented from the old neighborhood to the new neighborhood. People keep living in between for years. For many, definitely for labor issues, definitely, mainly for labor questions, including that the youth who are like half my age, they will be like, I mean, in their 20s and they're 17 years old, 18 years old, they are doing drug dealing in their old neighborhoods. They don't know what does it mean to live in the new neighborhood. Going to the new neighborhood, which people face number of issues, definitely a huge chunk about stigmatization, including inside al-Asmarat, and Mustafa Mahi is here. I mean, he can speak about Asmarat, not me. But I mean, what does it mean to go to a new neighborhood that is social housing like this? All the apartments looks alike, and they are surveilled most of the time of what to do and what not to do, including the cleaning of Bastet al-Salem, which is in front of the apartment. And while I was there actually visiting people who were relocated to al-Asmarat, someone will come from the district, which is Hayy al-Asmarat, an employee, come to give them a piece of paper and they need to sign it and they don't know how to read and write. And they don't know what's written in there, and he's only telling them, okay, don't throw anything in front of the apartment, right? And they don't know actually what's in there, and they decided to hand me the ticket. Okay, Bashmuhandisa, please know what is there, right? And then it's only a warning that they are gonna start to pay fines each month above their own whatever rent that they are paying. And all of this relocation actually process, it has tons of corruption, because people not only has to pay like something like a security deposit for the apartment, which number of thousands, but just for their name to get listed in the names, the lucky names who are gonna get apartments in the new neighborhood, it's a massive process. It's a big process inside the neighborhood itself. So this is one thing that has to do with the survey committee. Another thing is that that is very problematic, all diversity and aramil. What's aramil in English? Widows. Thank you. So widows and divorcee people, both gender, actually are not allowed to get a new apartment because they consider to be a single person. So this is something. So this is how this number only are the people who are literally getting new apartments. Including to this, if anyone is above age, the government consider, and this is all about the municipalities, they consider that they should live with their son or with their daughter. I mean, anyone who's above 60, a senior citizen, they are not considered a unit, right? A unit as a family unit, they are not a unit anymore. So this is what happened in terms of moving on our understanding, because it's something that was like I cared a lot about to follow up with residents actually from El Madabagh. Up until the moment that we had a huge process, up until that only 10 out of 30 families who were able actually to get apartments in Al-Asmarat. And I cannot deny this has to do with intervention, meaning that it was a time that I had to intervene and deal with my own subjectivity as El-Bash Muhandisa, who's able to be bilingual, who's able to enter government employees and talk to them and try to mediate to understand what's going on in this process. So I mean, and yeah, it was a lot. So this is, I'm gonna stop here, and this is something that is I'm gonna stop here in terms of the destruction. In terms of, this is few days ago, this is March 24th. And talking about how the government, or even, I mean, I'm not sure who's the admin of the page, but Jumhuriyat Manyan al-Ruda and all of the destruction that is happening in Al-Manyan, right? With all of what's going on and the very interesting fight that is happening over the comments on the Facebook. Someone is like, yeah, I am with all of this destruction of Ashwaiyat because, yeah, people should be reimbursed or like, you know, compensated, and that's it, right? Another person will be like, yeah, actually, we got 400,000 pounds, but actually they bring us nothing. It's nothing. They take the money, but it's nothing, right? So all of these fights of what should happen, and there are a number of people who did boycott the relocation, right? And this is always not said. It's not said, and many of the residents actually in 2020, we were running after many citizens who object and they get arrested. And the arrest process cannot take a form of human rights advocacy because people are getting arrested as a method of intimidation for 2 weeks and then they release them, right? So it's not something that we can campaign on, especially that it was the pandemic and it was after Muhammad Ali, so there was no way to do anything. So I mean, so this is the context in which, but this is, I mean, this is few days ago, this is now 6 years plus the time I'm talking about. And what does it mean that people actually are complaining, but they know, and now you know how much actually Facebook and social media are highly policed. What does it mean that people will do a video screaming and then they will be arrested in a few days, right? So this is what's going on in terms of destruction. In terms of construction, you know it. حلاوة البدايات, right? So you have all of these new constructions, which looks massive, which looks amazing. Aesthetically, I'm not sure. I mean, when they started with these two, I mean, there was a debate about what to call the cathedralia, and suddenly, and I'm sorry, I'm old generation, but I mean, when we were seeing الأذان في التلفزيون, it was all bringing الحرم المكي and الحرم النبوي, and then suddenly it's only bringing العاصمة الإدارية الجديدة, so I bet that القبلة اتغيرت. Anyway, it's a very like a Muslim culture anecdote, but it's very important because I was like, what's going on? Why الأذان is being televised, being shoot in العاصمة الإدارية الجديدة, right? So this was a part, and then we had this construction that was happening actually in the last 3 years. Now most of this is done. This is المبنى الحكومي, the governmental district. This is المبنى الأيقوني and all of what the construction that is actually happening by the Chinese. Let me put it as the Chinese now and stop there. And then we have حلاوة البدايات, which you saw it already a few days ago, right? Which is all about that this is a final product that is being sold to us as if it's حلاوة البدايات. I don't know which بدايات. I have no idea, right? But I mean, there is a promise of an amazing aesthetic life. Very spectacular. Very, very spectacular, right? Very spectacular in terms of, there is something بالعربي, I will say it's مشهدي, which is the word spectacular. شيء مشهدي إنه wow, everything looks amazing, right? Including Tamer Hosni, unfortunately. Everything looks perfect and everything is static-wise. It's being sold to us that this is the promise, right? And to be honest, for me, when I look at it, I don't know how can I live there, or even if I can, I know that I can't live there. But I mean, in terms of what is the promise and for who? Right? According to statistics of income in Egypt, we only have 4% who can literally afford living in so-called Egypt, right? But in terms of Masr, I don't know. What does it mean to have this spectacular in terms of who can afford doing this without being in huge debts? And I don't know for how many years. So this is what I wanted to tell you about construction. What does it mean to think of these construction in terms of different classes? This is Masr, this is العلمين الجديدة. And what does it mean even to have Masr on the floor? And now it's here somewhere. It's here, right? So this is the final image in terms of القصر الجمهوري في العاصمة في العلمين الجديدة. And then we have the construction that is very related to our Cairo, right? The bridge. The bridge is something as an element that we are all now are dealing with, whether we like it or not. It feels unsafe, but it feels okay. I don't know, I mean, it feels unsafe for me. Statically, engineering-wise, something in the civil engineering itself looks not intimidating, but it's a lot, massive concrete, right? And then I try to understand how many people really own cars in Egypt, not only in Cairo, but it's only 2.6, and this is not accurate because this is not only for private, this is also all the المركبات اللي مترخصة في مصر. Okay, so the whole number, the massive number is 10 million. 10 million, 2.6 out of them are in Cairo, 1.4 in Giza. This means that mostly between 50 to 60% of them are private cars, right? But the rest are like, okay, I mean, أوتوبيسات, ميكروباصات, whatever, كل الأنواع الرخص التانية. So this means that I don't know how many people really have a car to be able to use these bridges. Because these bridges is not for microbuses. Microbuses are going to be like, they are already prevented from using most of these bridges. Now our only hope is to be التردد السريع, to be able like to be something as a public transportation that is really going to make use of all of this massive infrastructure of the bridge, right? So this is, I mean, something for me, I'm literally analyzing only as an anthropologist from a class perspective. Not from any other perspective, but only from a class perspective. All of these massive constructions, where it's going and for who, right? By who we know, but for who? I don't know for who. How many people are able to use it, right? People will be like, yeah, now we can go from a place to another in 20 minutes, from, I don't know, تجمع to 6 October. Amazing, but how many people have cars to be able to do this? Because now, even with the gas prices, I don't know if I can do it via, right?
The car prices themselves.
Yeah, exactly. This is all a question that is vital in terms of thinking of the question of construction. Construction for who? And who is able to use all of this? How many Egyptians? This is my only questions in terms of this. I don't have a lot to say. And this is the constructions that are going to happen in Maspero Triangle. I mean, this is the Avant project, which is the design project, right? And how it looks like. This is what the architecture firm did, the associate consultants imagined in terms of relocating all of the people. And here, I need just to differentiate between two things because I think they are better. And these two photos are actually in the last few days. The massive construction that is happening in Maspero Triangle. Here is Maspero Triangle now. And there is something. What's happening in Maspero Triangle is urban redevelopment, because I think now we have a discussion in Egypt between the word gentrification and urban redevelopment. And there is a big difference. What's happening in West al-Balad, like downtown, not here, downtown Tahrir Square, downtown Old Cairo, is literally gentrification, because yes, it's aiming to replace the strata that live there with new things. Abu Auf for me is an amazing example. Abu Auf is actually Starbucks USA, because the Starbucks is used in the USA as a gentrification technique in terms of commercialization, right? Abu Auf for me now in Egypt, this is what's happening. Because actually since 2019, they doubled their own investments and it became all in shares with Emirates. So there is a story about the finances of Abu Auf. And which is what's happening in gentrification is very different than urban redevelopment. Urban redevelopment, it's total wipe out to people, total destruction, and we will not be able to ask us a question, where did the people go? With the gentrification, sometimes we can follow some ties, but with urban redevelopment, it's much more threatening, right? And I think the only words I can say, because this is something I care about and thinking conceptually, we did some effort, number of us, to understand what the word gentrification is, and we try to translate it الإحلال الطبقي العمراني. But with the word of urban redevelopment, I think we do not have any equal of it, but التدمير العمراني, not التطوير العمراني. And this is something, it needs some work in writing in Arabic to understand what does it mean to talk about that and understand. So this is something that I wanted just to put there conceptually, and I'm gonna conclude. But two things, between the destruction and construction, and we are all crushed between them, whether we are using the bridge, whether we are, our families or ourselves live in places that are completely wiped out. And what does it mean to deal with all of these new settlements and try to fit into them, because there is a huge cultural question, not only a financial question. So there is this, and I think there is a big question has to do with our agency. I don't know where is our agency in this, because I mean, with that, we don't have local committees, which is المجالس الشعبية المحلية are not there since 2012. We don't have them anymore. So all of these, that's why I decided to share with you the content that is coming from Facebook, because actually, it shows what does it mean that there is no discussion. It's not only coming out of my field work in بولاق أبو العلا المصر القديمة, but also what does it mean there is no discussion. You will meet people from the neighborhood and you will tell them, oh, we saw that there is a participatory process with the government, right? But there is no participatory process. People, even in the most places, Maspero Triangle, I think is the most place where we had some kind of a shade of a participatory process, which that's why I call it a negotiated eviction, not a forced eviction, because there was some negotiation. But I meet people who lives in بولاق أبو العلا, especially in Maspero Triangle, and they had no idea that there is a participatory process that was going on, right? So I think with the question of agency as a conceptual understanding, it's very important to think about it all the time. The people in Heliopolis, actually in مصر الجديدة, they try to negotiate with the government in terms of all قطع الأشجار الجميلة. So what does it mean that with all the greenery removers and the trees that we are in love with that are getting cut all the time? So what I know from people on the ground in terms of both Heliopolis and Al Maadi, people try to negotiate with the municipalities to understand why they are cutting off the trees. And they didn't go anywhere, which actually canceled their agency in a second, right? And this is something that I care about because I care about participation. I mean, it doesn't have to be political representation in terms of المجالس الشعبية المحلية, but what does it mean that even we don't have the venue to talk about it? And when we try to complain or object via social media, it becomes a question of arrest. So I think there is something conceptually, I'm going to say, I didn't want this to be fully academic, but I'm just going to throw it there because I think it's part of the understanding of urban political economy now that we have a huge question about class antagonism. And the question of class antagonism with its even heterodox Marxism understanding of what does it mean to understand class, not as a position, but as a lived experience, right? And I think most of us now in Egypt, we cannot define which class we belong to in terms of between our social class, between our cultural capital, between our financial capital, and they are all not matching anymore, right? And not matching because we are unique in Egypt. It's happening all across the world. But I think there is something about class antagonism that is very important to understand now, because the dynamics between the idea of al-maslaha, what kind of interest that is happening because of all of these projects, right? In terms of how it's related to us, there is a mismatch. And it's not only a mismatch, it's an antagonistic relationship. There is a struggle happening in between. And the radicalization of the classes is a lot. I'm gonna just say some names because this is what I'm thinking with these days. I'm going a lot to Michel Thuriot and Frantz Fanon, which has to do with very post-colonial understanding, but I think it's very valid because the question of liberation needs to be back to the discussion. And with the amazing Frantz Fanon understanding that the difference between independence and liberation, because yes, we passed through independence, but we didn't go through liberation in terms of talking about the global south. And definitely with Rolf Thuriot, what does it mean to silence the past and understand, okay, how can we deal with this? It has a colonial understanding, including the person who is in Facebook, because yeah, I mean, here comes my anthropologist, the anthropology part of me. And she says, yeah, I mean, مغصوبين على احتلال من الداخل بقوة داخلية المفروض إنها بتحمينا، لكن هي الاحتلال والمستعمر والمحتفظ. Right? So even people and that's why I told you about the anecdote in 2017 and 18, while people were evicted, especially with the military, they considered themselves Palestinians even before the genocide. So I think this is important to think about, and that's why I'm going to colonial and post-colonial school of thought, understanding Ruth Gilmore in terms of shadowing the state. What does it mean that the people we are talking about every day, they are dealing with the state in a much more front way, because in all of my field work, people have to deal with the police station, with the municipalities in their everyday life. And what does it mean that sometimes you need to shadow the state in many ways, which is going to be my book about the counterinsurgency that Amr thankfully introduced. Thinking with Don Kolb and James Carrier, because they are giving us a new understanding of anthropology of class. And what does it mean to think of class antagonism in the struggle itself, but as a lived experience, with an intersectional understanding of the people who are getting not evicted, but getting to be understood as anthropological subjects in the city, right? And this is my understanding of what they have said. Yeah, so this is what I wanted to say today to understand people between construction and construction. Thank you so much. I think I'm on time. We said but I took more. But yeah.
I'm really grateful that you're here, and not very grateful that we're talking about the same thing we have been talking about, both of us, for years probably. No, it's not. It's not about you. It's not your fault. I think it's I think raising the class antagonism part is like actually I'm happy with that, because while you were talking, two things that came in my mind. It's more what I'm saying is more like a commentary and an engagement to what you said, more than a question. So the first thing is that I was thinking about the reception of all of this destruction happening in the middle of Cairo, in front of the eyes of everyone, and how it shifted over the last 15 years. From a Spiro triangle, which I claim that there was a sense of sympathy with the people there, until now, when like every time this question of destructing neighborhoods, etc., is raised in a discussion with a family member or a taxi driver or whatever, it turns into a fight, because people are thinking like, okay, that's totally fine. So this shift in reception, it says something here. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I like the parallel, like you showed that the
Construction and the construction.
yes, between what's happening in the, I don't know, the new Alamein, the new capital, all of that, and the construction that's happening there. And I know that you are not just saying this is two things that's happening in parallel, but actually they have more relationship in a way, and that's maybe I'm willing to hear you talk, expand more on that if you have anything more to say about that or care about that. There is, in a way, I think there was a necessity in destroying Maspiro and Batn al-Baqara and all of that in a way to build this new model of urbanization. They are interlinked in that way. And I think both the change in reception and the relationship between the construction and destruction are actually signs of class antagonism in that sense.
I believe in this, and I think there is something definitely that I will never be dismissive of. What does it mean to talk about post-2011, post-2013? They have to go hand in hand, because post-2015, when a new urban agenda started, it had to be reclaiming the position of the state or the sovereignty of the state. And the sovereignty of the state has to be massive. And I believe that there is some kind of punishment in terms of all of these so-called, who are these working classes who were actually they break all the fear and they were in the streets all the time. And there has to be a reclaiming to the, not only to the public space, but to the understanding of the city. Because what has broken in terms of our fear and for us as generation, but also across classes, was huge. So I think they have to go hand in hand, not definitely from a political economic urban political economic understanding that they think they can still do, what does it mean to do accumulation by disposition? So it's not working, right? And this is the big question that we think, okay, David Harvey, thank you so much. It's accumulation by disposition, but actually it's not only. It's something that's why I'm thinking a lot about insurgency. What does it mean that you need all of this urbanization and construction to be a counter-insurgent in its own act? In its own act, that we know that I'm what my mother or my friends will tell me, we didn't find the street, we found the bridge. You feel that, and actually what is very disorienting is that you know the landmarks. I'm going to meet you at this koshka and we know that the koshka is there. But what does it mean that we are dealing with this koshka as if it's a cloud? Literally, right? And I think it's part of. But I have a longer answer. Will come in the next 15 years.
Thank you for the brilliant presentation. I have two questions. The first one is regarding the bridges. I think what I understood that you mentioned that the microbuses are not allowed. Do you mean that it's not in the normal route of the microbuses to be on those bridges, or they will actually not be allowed to be on those bridges? So this is the first question, because this is something I've never known, that they can't be like Uber or our cars, etc. Yeah. So number two is regarding actually the important story about the evacuation of people and then not having them in the new housing. So the numbers you mentioned, in your opinion, what could have been done differently? Looking back at what the government done, first in the stage of evacuating those people, was it inevitable in your opinion or not to implement whatever agenda for the public interest? And number two, after being evacuated, could it have been done differently, the evacuation itself and the preparation in terms of preparing the housing for all those who have been evacuated? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Actually, no, the microbuses thing is a policy. It's a policy, and even that's why even including inside the Tajamma al-Khamis, you have only عربيات التمنات. But and try to start to observe it, but literally the ring road, actually parts of it, microbuses are not allowed to be there, right? So this is a policy that comes from the state. It's not us that we are inventing the story, right? And actually, some of them, they have microbuses, but supposedly once the PTR or أتوبيس التردد السريع, once it's going to open, there will be no microbuses allowed, right? And I mean, and I think, I'm not an expert in this, but I know that some roads has this policy and some roads are not, right? But in terms of all the bridges that is happening all around the city, number of them, especially in places which is a high sensitive security neighborhoods, microbuses and two-wheels drive, motorcyclette or scooters are not allowed for security reasons. So only private cars are allowed, and that's why you will find a shorty مرور or like, a police person in the beginning of the bridge, because some cars are not allowed to go up there, right? And because I'm a scooter driver, so that's why I navigated this. And what does it mean not to be allowed to go over the bridge, right? Because it means that because the bridge is a high sensitive point, it can see all around, right? So this is something, but there is definitely the other question about microbuses. It's a class question. Has to do with this microbuses are private, but still they are public transportation and they are not really equipped with how the security system is working. And I would love that someone more specialized in this to give us more answers why the microbuses are not allowed. This is the first question. In terms of my imagination, I had an imagination with number of people, and that's why Maspero Triangle, even it was a participatory process. I see that there is a big difference between excluding the people and dealing them that they are شوية بطاطس, right? Literally, and you can just evict them and deal with them, that you can take them from one place to other. So with the numbers, it's not about all of them. And what does it mean to really understand that easily, and in my head it's easy, but it needs time in policy. What does it mean to participate with the people in the neighborhood, to be able to upgrade the neighborhood with the people, not against them? Which is, I know that, and participatory action planning around the world, it takes time, but it happened. It happened, and you can do it through all of the same financial model of terms of get a foreign fund, and then you do an art project in the neighborhood, and you try to work with the people and understand, oh, we need a sanitary system, we need clean water. What does it mean? Even all of the things about, oh, actually, all of this planning was not official. So the ambulance and the fire truck cannot go there. And unfortunately, I'm an architect. This is all solvable. Solvable if you want to solve it, because we didn't disrupt actually القاهرة الفاطمية. Though actually the streets also are small, right? But there are solutions for this, but this is the logic of who is designing. Is the person who's doing the urban planning for the future of the city, is imagining the city with the people or without them? And which people? So this is how I think about it, but I believe it's doable and it's have been done. Yeah.
I want to go back to 2 points. Where you've ended, and how do you want to think about this project, following more or less Mustafa, but in terms of the question of the political subjectivity? Because everything since 2013 is about really producing a very particular kind of political subject that will see your presence or the presence of the Ashwaiya as something that needs to be eradicated. Yeah. So how do you think of class through political subjectivity so that class doesn't stay as in a very classic sense, in that sense? Because the project is about the political in that sense, or that's how I read it.
Yeah.
The other one, if you combine that with Fanon, and the question of the problem is not the problem precisely happens or starts after the moment of independence with regard to the question of the nation and the question of the state. How do you bring then the first question, and what kind of states are we talking about that makes it possible for the coloniality to continue under every possible rubric, and hence totally understandable. دول اليهود. احنا محتلين. And if you go downtown now, downtown is محتلة in terms of the darkness at night, etc., etc. So how do you want to think about the post-colonial era? Precisely from the standpoint of the millennium, not the post-colonial 70s and 80s as it was developing, because there is a very different iteration of it. There is a continuity, but very different iteration of the post-colonial.
Yeah. I think what I can say now, because I mean, my PhD project changed a lot while I was doing it, because that understanding the people of the city, I discovered that I have a lot of romanticization, right? And this was a critique in my MA, that I have a lot of romanticization to understand the political subject in the neighborhood. And that's why I went into the whole route of securitization to try to understand what the people who's dealing with اسم البوليس, who are البلطجية, who are the drug dealers, right? Because it means that all of these classes, as it's not a one class, and they have different positionality in the neighborhood and different narratives in the neighborhood, right? Who to shame, who to morally shame, who did participate in the revolution, no, who did help البلطجية, which is actually very important. In 2019, while doing the PhD main field work, I was wishing, but lying to myself, that part of this transformation has to do with dismantling of البلطجية network and how securitization is working in Egypt. Definitely no, it's only be relocated, right? And this is something that's why I am in contestation and understand this with myself. What is the political subject now in terms of zero agency, right? Zero ability to choose, because the ability to choose means انتهاء مستقبل in terms of presence, right? So,
but the process is much more complicated than the presence. Sometimes we think of the presence as the most evil, but actually what happens on an everyday,
surveillance.
it's surveillance not necessarily by the state.
Yeah.
I mean, when the state apparatus, as divided as it is, what's capable of doing is creating a political subject that has no qualms about brutalizing the next political subject to him or her. And I think that's where the
and this is the المفصلة, that has to take us back to Franz Fanon. How can we think of our existence, so-called quote unquote, as a nation with the authorities that are there? And this is where the neo-colonial understanding would come. That it's not only a relationship of, okay, we are same nation, fine, we are all Egyptians, fine. But what does it mean that this surveillance and securitization manifestation is coming in a way that is completely neo-colonial and based on a neo-colonial understanding in its tools?
And so, on my balcony.
Now we can
I don't know, may I'd like to add something to this discussion, because it is intriguing that you're going back to Franz Fanon at that moment. But one author who writes in conjunction is Cordelia Eliashar. And especially in that book, towards the end, she creates a vision of the Barza to describe the political subjectivity.
The last book, the colonial book.
The last book.
Yeah.
Very, very nice.
It's amazing.
But she creates this visual image of the Barza, okay? She describes the post-colonial state / the post-colonial subjects being forced into this mobility, the disposition, the continued dislocation, the relocation, all of those mobility. She visualized it as a barzakh being forced into a trap that you cannot escape, because you're either forced by the state, which is in our case disengaged already, and it's replaced by the security state, but you're also pushed into the barzakh by the class struggle. So you're basically, your location on the barzakh is defined in terms of who's pushing you and how they're pushing you into that mobility. But the mobility is a fact of the post-colonial political subjectivity, which would be very interesting if you...
To be engaged here,
Definitely.
And I cannot go back, I think, next time that happened. I can think.
More questions. Julia
Eliashar.
Nadine.
I'm conscious of the time, so if anyone else wants to go, think that
with practical question. The area above the O of Mosquero on the very right-hand side. From there towards Ramses. Anyone has an idea what's happening?
In this area,
Yeah,
these
above,
new
above 26th of July,
Yeah,
along
yeah.
along Gala.
frame بتاعي.
Yes.
برا هنا.
Yeah, yeah. It's outside the picture, so to say, from that corner.
Yeah.
All the way to Ramses to the train station. Anyone has an idea what's going to happen to that area?
Supposedly there will be a new metro station, right? And that's why there is a lot of destruction in there. And it's going to be connected to this design.
Built, no?
The rest of the street أمنية.
Yeah, on the
عند الأهرام.
outside the picture. No,
Up for Medel Ramses?
Yes.
No, we don't know.
Nobody knows, no? I'm asking because we are the church at the very
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
But this is also part of why we don't have any practical answer, because this is what the state and the municipalities are doing to us. We are keep asking as if there is a vision like this, as if someone has a full vision of what's going on, right? Nobody knows, and then there are very important buildings and tombs that are getting destructed, and then we are like, oh, we don't know, and we don't know, and we are asking about ourselves. So yeah, please.
My question isn't very political, but I feel like this always confuses me. Now, you said هنا and they're destroying parts of the city because they're building a metro. When that happened برضه في مصر الجديدة where they took off the old tram and the trees ومش عارف ايه to build the metro. The metro is important. It's green. It's an important infrastructure to have in any major city. But do you think in having this infrastructure, يعني
مهمة يعني ولا لا؟
مهمة فإن إحنا عادي إن إحنا نبوظ كل the history and the trees and cut down the trees and all
لا,
this.
what I'm fully saying that all of this destruction should have not happened without the participation of the people of the city to decide what we want to do. Is this infrastructure important? No. And none of these projects, we are all sure that it's a really aiming for a project that is going to be something public benefit. But this is also like kind of mystical. I mean, it's like illusional. In my own words, it's illusional. Illusional, what does it mean that you need a subway? Do the subway, but you can keep the people and you can keep the trees and you can keep the tram, right? And this is the issue that I'm addressing actually, that all of this destruction is not at all justified. Justified based on what? If we need to do a public service that is for everyone in the cities, then we need to discuss it. It needs to go into the برلمان على الأقل حتى. طيب برلمان يقول لنا what's going to happen in the church, but actually we don't know. Right? فإنه لا, I'm not saying that this is happening only because of المترو. I'm totally with you.
This applies to the monorail.
This applies to the monorail.
This is where the upper class living.
Exactly.
برضو, if you're creating this model, you should see if there is a space for insurgency within the upper class or not.
Sure. شكرا جدا. Thank you so much for being with me.